Let's bring in former senior economic advisor to President Trump, Steve Moore. Steve, you know, it really harkens back 50 years to in the 1970s. We had this era called limits to growth. Remember that, where you were supposed to limit the energy you used, the capital you used if you were an entrepreneur, and now even food. I mean, this really is a disgrace. It's not at all what America should be.
Hi, David. Well, you said just a few minutes ago that this is unbelievable. And when your producer told me about this story this morning, I said I didn't believe it because we are the breadbasket of the world. We have the most productive farmers. We have the most incredible, farmland in this country. My wife grew up in Northern California, where you can grow everything from pecans to wheat to fruits and vegetables. So I am disturbed by this. I think your analysis that you just did of the problem is spot on. Look, energy is incredibly critical to growing food. Most people don't realize that. Not only is it important, by the way, in terms of the fertilizer you need and the irrigation that are necessary for agriculture, but energy is also necessary for the transportation of the food. And look what's happened to diesel costs. So these are all making, unfortunately, American agriculture less productive relative to other countries. And that is a sea shift because we've been, for the last 100 years, a major food exporter, not an importer.
Yeah, and the bottom line is what makes America great is that there are no limitations to growth. We have the capacity to go to the moon. We have the capacity to become energy independent, to feed the world. And by the way, we can become energy independent by having cleaner air, as we've proved over the past 10 years through the use of natural gas and cleaner forms of fossil fuel. So we can do all that unless you have this confining mindset and you remove all the capital from the private sector and give it to government bureaucrats.
Well put. And one of the things that worries me, look, we're a country that if our food production falls a little bit, we can get the food, from somewhere else. And I want it made in America. I want it grown in America. But we have other options. But, you're seeing an increase, according to the United Nations, an increase in hunger and famine and even starvation in some cases in some countries because they've done the same thing. The United States and developed countries are going to these other nations saying, oh, don't use modern fertilizer, don't use coal plants, and that's causing real hunger problems all over the world. So we better get serious about producing the energy we need to produce factory goods, but also our agricultural products, because as you and I know, there are no limits to growth as long as we have cheap and abundant energy, which we should have, but we don't have right now. By the way, the diesel prices that I was just talking about, those diesel prices are now twice as high as they were when Trump left office, David.
Amazing, amazing. Well, the bottom line is you can't do any of this. You can't have innovation. You can't have the productivity with stagflation. And that's what you have when you have the government draining the resources of the private sector. That's what has to change. I mean, yes, energy, I think, is the key component to turning things around. But you have to just stop the grab by the government to become a more socialist country.
So, David, I was with your and my buddy Larry Kudlow this morning, and we talked at a conference, and we made exactly that point, that the top priorities for the Republicans when they take over the House should be, number one, to secure America's energy supply again and move away from the policies of Biden so we can be number one on energy. But also, number two, is making sure that we're not diverting resources from our productive private businesses to government. And that means we're going to have to do some big cuts in government spending so those resources are freed for our productive private sector, whether it's our farmers or our manufacturers or our technology industry.
Final question. Is the GOP Congress, the majority GOP Congress coming in January, are they going to have the power to pull back on some of this and well, for one thing that we were talking about, to not supersize the IRS, putting all of our money in bureaucrats' pockets, but supersize the private sector?
Well, that's a tricky question, because do they have the power to do it? Yes, they do. It takes two chambers of Congress to pass any new spending. So the Republicans have a one-house veto over spending they don't want to do. The real question is, do they have the backbone? Do they have the fortitude to do it? And we'll have to see about that one, David.
Backbone inside the Beltway is in short supply, I must say. It always has been, probably always will be. But you're there to push them along, Steve. Thank you very much for coming here. Appreciate it.